Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Agustina Jaime. I'm a part of the group of McNeil Europe. I'm an industrial designer. So in this webinar, we have the pleasure to have with us Simone Berardelli and Nehama Shetter-Baraban. So thank you so much for being with us today. No worries. So if you're a landscape designer, for sure you already know and use Rhino plugin, Lands Design, which is a BIM solution within Rhino, where you can do all landscape modeling and obtaining listing and quantifications inside Rhino just by using lands. So with tools like Rhino.inside.Revit, the model of RhinoLands can be imported to Revit as a BIM model with all its data like topography and vegetation. However, in this webinar particularly, we will focus on how to integrate technology diversity for an efficient workflow in a design team. So when, for example, designing with RhinoLands and Grasshopper, we will discover easy ways to transfer this data from Rhino to Revit for smoother documentation. So our speakers today are Simone, as I said, he's a BIM coordinator at Heatherwick Studio with a decade of international experience. His focus on BIM and architectural design is marked by attention to detail and collaboration. His practical approach and adaptability enrich diverse architectural projects. We also have the pleasure of having Nehama with us, that she will be doing the presentation later. So she's a landscape architect and a CEO of Arc Intelligence. After nearly 6 years of experience leading landscape design projects, she joined Arc Intelligence in 2019 with the aspiration to empower other landscape architects with transformative technology. So feel free to use the chat at any time, and at the end of the webinar, we will have some time for our speakers to answer you. If there's anything that I can answer, I will do it through the chat. But if not, just feel free to use it to comment or share whatever you feel. So welcome, and whenever you're ready, Simone, please, you can start.
So I prepared a brief presentation about our studio. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So this is our studio, Heatherwick Studio, based in London. And as you can see in this picture, we are 250 between designer, maker, architect, whatever you want to call it. We make object, building, infrastructure. So a variety of projects that have different scale and different topics, and we have a wide range of projects that are completely different from one another. This is the look and feel of our office in London. We recently moved office, but we're still in King's Cross, central London. And these are the kind of projects that we do. Those projects are really into the design of the landscape, and landscape is embedded into our DNA. So as you can see in this project, Torasa in Tokyo, the landscape is not just some greenery added on top, but it's literally inside our architecture and blended in, really. So I wanted to show a bunch of projects, and then we're going to focus on one, and we're going to start with that, describing a little, going into the technical with one of those. So this is one of the projects, but also we have, 1,000 Trees in Shanghai is another beautiful project that has a lot of beautiful landscape. You can see some picture. We have also Google Campus in California. This is another example of a big project where the landscape is blended into the architecture. This is Leeds, Maggie's, and you can see we are not missing trees and green element. But we also do public spaces. So this is what I wanted to show you today, is the project on the right, which is Pier 55. This is a project that is basically joining the concept of a park and a performance all together. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. This is the final project, is open to the public, and you can visit it, and is in New York. Is a beautiful project in on the Hudson River. So the project is basically trying to avoid this, basically, which is like a pier like this on the Hudson, a simple, but kind of joining a little bit the idea of the park and the pier all together and create a sense of community where people can come together, see some theater, art, and so you have a combination of all of these features all together on top of the Hudson. So it's a pretty special project, if you ask me, and you can visit it. It's now open, so it's really nice to. So I give you a little bit of a sense of what is this project about.
I think, Simone, if I can disturb you, I think this project is really, I think the best project to demonstrate Heatherwick way of thinking, because everything is so unique and special. And
yeah, thank you.
This is where Rhino can come in the picture, because everything is so amorphic and so unique. So for me, it's also exciting to be here where you present this project. So,
oh, thanks.
I'm gonna interrupt 1 second to agree that I'm in love with this project.
Yeah, and it's nice that we change the skylight in a way, no? Can you see this picture as well? It's really iconic, I would say. So yeah, so this is the final project. This is a model.
Also, your camera is off. I don't know if it's on purpose.
Yeah, it's just to make sure that the presentation it doesn't lag or something. Okay, so as you can see, the way it's designed is specifically is suit the today webinar, because we have a lot of iteration, and we use a lot of in the office we use a lot of Grasshopper. And so that allows us to create many option iteration, and we can make many studies. So this project is really iconic and a typical project for us to express like a variety of shape and test it. And so, but all of this started also with simple geometry like surfaces, extrusion, Voronoi pattern. We have a lot of those elements into the project. So I show you the final product in Revit. So this is the transition. What we're gonna see today is basically the transition between Rhino and Revit, because after the studies and all of the iteration that you see here, we need to jump into Revit. So one thing doesn't exclude the other. So Rhino doesn't exclude the fact that we're using Revit, and Revit doesn't exclude that we're using Rhino. So at some point, when the design is a little bit more fixed, I would say that we find our shape, we find our iteration that we are happy, Thomas review it or whatever, we kind of consolidate the design, the client is happy, we can jump into Revit and we can bring this in. And as you can see, the result is kind of, it gives justice to the actual design. So for us, it's a success to use Revit and Rhino, and Rhino.inside and all the other tools with environmental are absolutely useful to make this process flawless. So Rhino.inside is really, I sit literally in between these two, Rhino and Revit, and I help the designer deliver this beautiful project. So as you can see here at the top left, we have a kind of like a pattern, a paving pattern that today we're gonna cover in this webinar.
Yeah,
and
so
talk about
if I can interfere for 1 second.
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, so the process with you is that the designer has this crazy idea, and then they challenge you guys to start develop the scripts or the technology to make this idea come to life, and then start to change it and modify and play with it until the designers are happy, right?
Yeah, for what I've seen in my many projects that I've been working on, is not always the same, but in general, it started with some studies in Rhino, some script as well to if the project is requiring to develop some kind of script, like you can see the shape at the bottom of the column. It's a bit can be make it into a script. So it depends on the project, but it's more like a back and forward, I would say, from the designer and also the BIM as well. The cool thing about our team is that I can go back to the designer, talk about what kind of information I need, and go back into the script, change it and tweak it, and go back into Revit. So that's why Rhino.inside is really helpful in doing this project. And all of this started with just a simple surface. So let's jump into that. So what I'm going to show you today is we're gonna start with a Rhino file that has this basic surface, the basic shape, I would say, and we're gonna have also a blank Revit file that doesn't have literally anything inside. And then we're gonna have one script, which is the design script for this pattern that you see here. I just wanna highlight the pattern. So this pattern that you see here, we're gonna go through the principle and the basic logic behind this the script. And then we're gonna bake the surface as a toposolid into Revit, project this pattern on top of the literally like so. We're gonna project this into the surface. I'm gonna make a beautiful pattern, and we're gonna scatter a bunch of trees in Revit, referencing this surface from Rhino. So just to show how easy it could be when you have the right information to push everything across without any issue. How does it sound?
It sounds good. Just a small note. First of all, I think it's going to be super, super interesting to get a peek on the behind the scenes of how you guys, develop the technology. Also, a small note about the end. After that, I would give a very short presentation of how we developed our tool at Environment for Revit to help designers transition their designs from Rhino to Revit. And I want to say that Hathaway and Simone inspired us to develop this tool because I think that Rhino and Grasshopper are like a must tool for you guys, right? To make designs come true, because these kinds of designs, they cannot be included in some out-of-the-box tools. You always have to reinvent yourselves. You always have to rethink the technology. And what we wanted to do is just save the time and be a bridge between software, between different people in the design team with different skill sets. So hopefully this will be very interesting and will open room for discussion, I think.
Thank you. Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think like environmental tool as well, beside all of these, Rhino.inside tool are as many tools that we can use for a different project. So we adapt to the project, and depending on the skill set of our designer or architect, they can pick up different tool and adapt those tool to the different projects. So that's quite interesting to have all of the software all together, as many software as possible. So the architect can pick and choose the script, the tool, or whatever is needed for the project. So let's jump into that. So we're gonna recreate this paving. And what I need, so first of all, let's enable the solver. So what I need for this script is the path of the Revit of the Rhino surface, which is this one, and I'm gonna associate this surface into the BREP here, and then I can what else do I need is the path line, which is this one.
So it's like a center line, right?
It's like it's not necessarily the center line, but it's basically I'll show you what I mean, is basically the attractor of this pattern.
So it's like the magnets where the pattern should
Exactly that. So I can pick and choose. So now I just put something that looks organic, because I want the path to look like kind of organic, a little bit romantic, that goes left to right. Is not literally a center line. But with this one, then the script, what it does is to create take that boundary and populate a bunch of points inside this path. And then what we do here is that we can rearrange this point based referencing the line according to what we have here. So I show you what I mean in a second. So modifying this graph mapper, and we have different script to do the same thing. So this is just to let you know, this is just one script that we use for the Voronoi pattern and for this kind of specific project, but we have other scripts that work in another way. So it's not the final tool or whatever. It's always like one iteration of many that is possible. So I can change the graphic and remap the point according to the border and the line. That is kind of like the guideline, the attractor, as we said.
So essentially, every point stands for like a center of a paving stone.
Yes, of the Voronoi grid, basically. I'll show you that in a minute. So you see that these points are then becoming the Voronoi. So you see the point, and now you can see the Voronoi pattern. And now you can see that if I go back into the graph and I change this pattern, the mapper, the Voronoi is gonna adapt. So you could say at this point, why don't you do this in Revit right away?
Right. I mean, there are different options to do that, right?
Yeah, there are many options, but to be honest, the fact is that we design a free-forming Rhino, and then we have also all of the script around, and Grasshopper is really advanced and flexible. So this agility allows you to basically retain that quick study and option that the tool allow you to basically do, and we don't lose with Rhino Inside, we don't lose that speed. So we retain this information and we can push them into Revit. So what we do is to split the script into two. One is the design script, and is the one that I just showing you. And then we have another script that is the translation script, I will call it. So is the script that we take this paving or whatever shape and we import it with the Rhino inside node. So this is a bit of a note that we need to say for people that are not they don't know Rhino Inside that well. So if you open Rhino Inside within the Revit space, you can see the Rhino Inside node. Otherwise, if you're opening the Rhino Inside script into the regular Rhino and Grasshopper, you wouldn't see the Rhino Inside node. So
this is the top tools that you have there in the Grasshopper. They're solely for Revit, right? They're with Rhino Inside.
This one, the Revit element, the Revit, and also those one will not show up if you open it in the regular environment, just Rhino and Grasshopper. So that's why we split the script. The design script can stay into the Rhino world, let's say, and the Rhino Inside it can go into the Revit Rhino inside, and we have all of the node there. And I show you what I mean. It sounds complicated, but it's not. And so let's say that I really like this pattern. We review this pattern. We really love it. I can bake this into Revit. So I do that because we want some control revision, because otherwise we could literally push this this node right into a Rhino inside node and go straight into that. But again, we like to keep it the design and the import into separate. So let's assume that I bake, for the sake of this presentation, I bake a bunch of patterns that are very different just to show the result. And we're gonna bake one that is here. So now that we review the design script and we are happy with the design, we can literally close this script and jump into the translation script, sorry. So now that we have the pattern, we can switch off the outline. What we're gonna do, as we were discussing at the beginning, we're gonna import this surface into Revit, by the way. So I'm gonna just simply associate this surface in here. Sorry, I'll just quickly switch off this. I'm gonna just do everything gradually, so I'm gonna explain everything that is happening into the script. So now I'm gonna enable these surfaces that I've associated to the node, and I'm gonna explain what is happening. In the meantime, the software is basically baking this into Revit, and I'll show you what I mean. So in here we have basically the script is extracting the outline that we have in Rhino, and on the other side is mapping the surface with a bunch of points. Since in Rhino and Revit, they have a bit of a different way of creating surfaces and how they shape NURB, they follow different rules. What I can do though with Grasshopper, so that's why it's really interesting to use Grasshopper, is that I can extract this point and use it to reference my geometry in Revit.
I have a question, Simone. So, but usually you would have a dedicated node in Rhino inside to just take a surface and just transform it into a toposolid, right?
We have this node. This is
Yeah.
the inside node. So now that I've extracted this,
So, but why did you add the points before? So
I explain that in a minute. So this node that you see here are the Rhino inside node.
Mhm.
So those are the nodes that are literally creating the surface into Revit. And what they need on one side, this node, it need the boundary. So the outline, like kind of like I don't remember the tool in Revit, that you create the toposolid, no?
Yeah, the sketch.
The sketch,
the sketch of the
basically, yes.
boundary. Yeah.
Yeah, the sketch of the boundaries in Revit. Then it needs the type, and then it needs the reference level. And then this toposolid is kind of hosting a shape. So what it needs on the other side is all of the coordinated point, basically, that is using a shape. So it's not just I'm taking that surface and I can feed that surface in here, because this node is actually asking for the host, which is the toposolid, and the point. And I can actually feed also the creases.
So essentially, you can control the amount of points that you will transition into Revit. And so if I understand correctly, the more points you will have, the more accuracy and smoothness you will have on the resulting surface within Revit.
Exactly. I can decide the definition in here. And then with this node, the shape, you can see that when I click in here, I have the actual Revit is a preview of what is happening in Revit, basically. So this toposolid is gonna see, you can see the top is there, and all of the meshes that are triangulated in all of those points. And all of those points, now you see that the surfaces are being imported. and it's exactly as the one in Rhino. And now I just reference that surfaces, and as you can see, it's imported with no problem. Just few minutes, so it's not really complete, but I need to specify the definition of the point. So now for our paving, what I can do is just simply selecting all of the surfaces that I want to use as a paving. So these guys, and associate those into the curve node, which is gonna feed into the Rhino inside node. So I'm gonna feed also the outline as a separate paving outline, and I'm gonna show you why. So now I'm gonna activate the Rhino inside node and bake this pattern into Revit. So what it's actually doing is taking all of that shape that I just showed you and project it into the topo solid that we just had in Revit. And
Really what you wanted to do in your workflow, you wanted to keep the pattern flat and to be able to play around with it as it's flat. And in Revit, you would actually project it onto the topo solid.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, the preview is here and it's showing that the pattern is gonna land into the surface. Let's go back into Revit, and there you go, done. So you can see the preview in Revit of the Rhino is the pattern underneath, but it's not, of course, imported into Revit.
It's not editable. It's just
it's just a preview, and the one at the top is now projected onto the surface, the topo solid. So you can see how fascinating it is that it's adapting to the shape, as you can see, and it's also like Revit native. So I have all of the information that I need here with the perimeter, the area, the volume. I can change the subdivision height. I can apply material. That's why it's really helpful. And if I want to change the design, it's not that complicated. I go back into the script, bake the surface, and import it into. So it's fairly quick to bake.
In your script, you defined each paver as a subdivision of the original surface.
Yes, let's go to the script. So this is the
subdivisions.
Yeah, this is the curve that I just baked. And now this curve are going into this, which is the Rhino inside node. So the Rhino inside nodes want the boundary of each subdivision and the topo solid that I'm referencing. So I'm feeding the topo solid that I created at the beginning and also the boundary. So the only condition that I need to kind of respect is that the boundary needs to be an enclosed region. As you know, Revit is a bit picky with the sketches. It needs to be very strict on that.
Yeah.
The Grasshopper script can do the job and create enclosed boundary. That's why we trim those surfaces, as you can see here, as an enclosed boundaries. And then I can specify, this is as well a Rhino inside node, what is the thickness that I want to have in Revit. So for now, I just put the 10 just for the sake of having like a small tile. But it's all done through Rhino Inside.
It's also important to say that with subdivisions in Revit, they cannot be exactly aligned with the topo solid. They have to have a certain offset above the topo solid.
Yeah.
So again, this is a choice, but I think you could as easily just create a separate topo solid for each element, right?
If you want, yes, absolutely. You can feed the different topo solid. I kind of like the idea is that if I want to further down the line change the shape of the topo solid, the path is gonna travel with it. So that's the cool part about it. So if I change my mind and I go back into Grasshopper and we change this, which is the host shape, this subdivision, it would adapt to it. So that's the cool part about it. I don't need to rebake or go back into the script.
Mm.
So what do you think is this is just one workflow. It can be done in different way.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. And then could you go into Revit and maybe show us, is everything you did right now, is it editable, topography? So what happens to this toposolid if you change it in Revit and then update the script?
Yeah, I need to I can unpin this object and further modify the shape of it. So you can see all of the triangle in here are the kind of like the meshes of the surface. But I need to keep this into Rhino Inside for now because we're gonna scatter some tree on top of it. So I need that reference.
But once you modify the toposolid in Revit, it kind of disconnects from the Grasshopper script?
Yes, it's kind of disconnecting through all that, but I have the option here. So if I right click on the node, there is this section here that it says tracking mode, and I can disable or replace or update. So if I change the node in Grasshopper, I can choose if this is gonna be updating the further toposolid that I created, or replacing it, or whatever I want, basically. So there is option to create other different object or replace them. So now that we have all of these, what we can do, and this is the other section of the script, is basically now I can feed this surface, which is the original surface, and feed that surface into the script. And I'm going to show you what it does right away. Okay, so now you can see the preview in Revit is already baked, but what it's doing is basically taking the surface that we imported at the beginning, referencing it again, and creating a matrix of point on top of it. So again, I can decide the definition of this point, and then randomly reduce this point because we want to give an effect that is kind of organic and natural. So we want to scatter randomly this point and evenly. But also on the other side, I'm referencing the path that I took at the beginning. So this path, the outline, I'm kind of taking that again. This is just a relay. And I'm taking the point that I'm falling, since I'm scattering this randomly, some of the point is gonna fall into the path. So what I'm doing is projecting this point onto the path and then excluding them from my placement. So at the end, I'm gonna have a bunch of points that are randomly placed around, but they never fall into my path. And then at the beginning and at the end here, I have my lovely Rhino Inside node. So until here, this is all a Grasshopper script. And these two are the kind of node that are baking, that are placing actually my family here. There are 2 trees and they are going according to this point that you see here. So if you jump.
But this script, you chose not to separate the Grasshopper and the Revit inside, Rhino inside Revit script. You just added the Rhino inside at the end of the script. I guess maybe because it's a simpler script.
Yes, it's a simpler script, definitely. As you can see, none of the trees are falling onto the path. And I have my lovely surfaces with a bunch of trees. What do you think? You like it?
I do. I think it looks very great. And I also really like your tree families. They are adorable.
Thank you.
And what I wanted to ask is, do you have also a definition in your script to the distances between the trees themselves? So could you dive a little bit deeper into the script of the scattering?
Yeah, we can. So in this case, we just divide the surface, but I can change it, increase it, so I can change the UV count, but I cannot, this is just a simple script to scatter, but I cannot define the actual distance between the trees. So it's not super sophisticated. The point is just to show how you can reference an object from Rhino, but placing into Revit. So the point is basically say, making sure that these points are on the right surface. I don't need to place them around manually. I don't need to regenerate them or go around and check them. I'm making sure that those points are correct, basically. And then I can kind of filter them out and go into the placement. And then I can change the seed and kind of spreading them around as I want. But yeah, there are many other options that we could do to kind of have a fixed distance, but retain the randomness of the trees. This is just a simple script to show the workflow but usually what we do is that we decide a bunch of tree that we want. So we define the tree that we want. So it would be maybe 3 or 4 type. We decide the number.
Decide what tree species you want.
Exactly. Then we decide how many of these species we want. We create and scatter around some of the point. And then based on the number, what the team is gonna do is gonna basically place those points into different layer as the pattern. So for example, here I just put like one pattern, but we have many. But let's assume that we have 3-1, 3-2, and 3-4. So based on the species, I have a configuration of point that then I will feed into the different Rhino inside node. So the conical node, it will have a set of points on the layer A, B, and C. So you go into the specific. For this case, I just wanted to, yeah.
So it's interesting for me as a landscape architect, because usually we like pick the location of every tree. So the way you're presenting it, you have a lot of options to the different placements of the trees. And so the landscape designers could really take a look and examine and evaluate, the how beneficial is the result design-wise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you tell us a little bit about the workflow within Revit? So once you do everything in Grasshopper and Rhino inside, and let's say that the design is finished and now you have to start deliver, you start working on it on Revit, and then you lose the connection to Rhino, or do you still maintain it even through the documentation process?
Yeah, interesting question. It depends, I would say. It depends on the project, like how is it, what is the configuration that we want to achieve, what is the design, how many options do we have. But let's say that we have a design that is fairly fixed, I would say. We tend to have to keep the Grasshopper script as a reference because it's really fast to rebuild the configuration. So if I want to change this pattern, for example, I can easily go back to the script that I just showed you and save the one configuration of that pattern in Grasshopper, and then go back and change it again. So I would say, yeah, we unplug from Grasshopper, but it's always there as a reference. So we can plug back in very quickly. That's the advantage of having, and that's why I love to work with Rhino, because it gives you the flexibility that you can jump back, revision it, go back into Revit fairly quickly, and you don't need to actually do that stuff all in Revit, So Revit is not just, but is mainly documenting and kind of schedule, which is powerful anyway. So now that I have all of this here, you can see that I have already the plan. I can change, I have all of my topo solid here with all of the areas. Now I think I have also already a planting schedule. and a top of solid schedule with all of the subdivision. So that's interesting to have all of the area already. But you can also use your lovely tool, environmental, to scatter. That's why it's nice to have different tool.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to demonstrate this one as well.
Nice. That would be beautiful. But it's nice to have every tool for the team that doesn't want to get into Grasshopper. Is a bit scared of using Grasshopper or Rhino, or maybe they know, since our team it has different people with different skill set, it's nice to have different tool for the job.
Exactly. So for those of you who joined late, my name is Nechama. I'm from Arc Intelligence. We develop environment for Revit. And actually working with Heatherwick, working with Simone, inspired us to think about, just what you just said. Because usually big teams include different people with different skill sets. And the interoperability is always the difficult part. If the designers work in Rhino and the delivery should be in Revit, the translation is always the hard part. It always takes time. And there is Rhino inside Revit, which is one thing, but some people are terrified of visual programming. I have to admit I'm one of them, although I should definitely conquer this challenge soon. So what Simone and I wanted to do for this webinar, which is interesting, after you show us the very inspiring workflow of the Voronoi paving, what I was thinking is to give it a try and see how we can translate it with environment for Revit. And so I kind of took your file and played around with it using
nice.
our Rhino assets tool. So basically the Rhino assets tool is meant for people who are not so much, don't really have the skill of Rhino Inside, which is visual programming. And it's meant to allow you to import these Rhino files into Revit, and you can even reload them. So you don't really, you keep the connection to Rhino. You can still keep working. The designers can still keep working in Rhino during the design process. So I'm just going to run the video. I was not brave so much because this topography is actually very big. It includes about 5,000 elevation points, which is quite big for a toposolid. So what I did, I opened the Rhino assets tool over here in environment. And as I opened the Rhino assets tool, I could just browse my library and import it. I kind of made the changes. So what I did, I actually projected your Voronoi pattern on the topography already in Rhino. And because what I wanted to do is I wanted to take a different approach to the subdivisions and load it as separate elements. So over here within the Rhino assets tool, I can actually see the layers and the objects the same way that they appear in Rhino, but I can control the import category of each element. So currently we allow to import as any category, but the only categories that we allow Revit native system families are floors and toposolids. We also plan on allowing you to import walls as well. So you can see the raw geometry that we get from Rhino. And I'm going to start with the paving stones, the independent paving stones. You can see that I can see each and every stone over here, and I will just select all of them. Let me run fast forward and click on these three dots. And over here in this window, I could just, that's the Revit part, right? So I could just select what category I want to use. And if I'm using a toposolid, then I can apply a system family. So now I get an access to all my toposolid types, and I could just define what toposolid type I want to apply to these pavings. And later on, I could just go back and define the topography and do the same with the overall topography. So I have two different types, one for the topography and one for the paving. And now I just import it into Revit. It's important to say that we also allow you to reload and reload from. So again, you can keep modifying, keep working with Rhino throughout your design process. Although it's important to say that if you tag elements and you already start documenting, you probably will lose some annotation, since reloading, we just regenerate the objects. I don't know, Simona, if it's the same way when you work with Rhino inside, if it's regenerating the objects and then you have to re-tag them or redo all the annotations.
Yes, because most of the time, the thing that you regenerate are basically new objects. They have a new ID for Revit.
Yeah.
So this new ID will make it as a new object, basically, and they will lose the tag. It will be orphan, basically. So, but it's really interesting that you're linking the object, so you retain that path, and it's very easy for someone that is not, again, into Grasshopper, or they don't know the Dynamo, whatever. They can easily relink the model. So that's really interesting and inspiring, to be honest.
Yeah, so environment really remembers your preferences. So also I can reload the objects, but also environment will remember that this surface was a specific type of toposolid, and it will remain this specific type even when you reload. It's all grouped. That's how we usually import things. But as you can see over here, I'm ungrouping. And what I wanted to show you is that this is a toposolid, and it's a totally editable toposolid, whether you're using environment topography tools or you're using native Revit tools to edit that. But you get all of these points. And this is where it's a little bit different from the script that you showed, because environment is kind of regenerating the points. Basically the rules is that it optimizes the placements of points to get the maximum accuracy of the original surface, rather than just defining a grid of points. So that's a little bit behind the scenes, and you can see that at each point you can select it and edit it, change the elevation, get all the information, and yeah, it's pretty heavy. And so these pavements over here are also toposolid. So let me fast a little bit forward. What I did right now, I wanted to, and this is also something that is unique. You can see over here at the bottom that I also imported the raw line work that you created in Rhino. And a lot of times it's important for landscape designers because sometimes they just use line works to create, topographies. So it was important for us to allow people to import line works. So what I did, I went to the plan view, and I used this line work to split the toposolid. And this is a new feature that wasn't available in the toposurface. I love it in the toposolid. You could just split it. And what I did, I used the pick line tool to trace the lines of your original path. And
that's nice. It's really can be really powerful to quickly do this in Revit,
Yeah, exactly. And I was trying to think as a landscape architect. I was saying, well, maybe I want, to have like a subgrade, a different material under these pavers. So I basically changed the type of the toposolid to a different type. So it will be visibly available to me, and also a little bit lower under the original toposolid. And so you have like a sub layer. So if you really want to be detailed about your construction documents, you can actually provide this sub material. Next, what I was trying to do, I was playing around with, all right, so Rhino was super powerful for the design, and now what are we going to do with it in Revit? So I was kind of amusing myself with what are the documentation options in Revit. So I went to, I used the environment to do select a similar, and I chose all these different pavers, and I turned them into an assembly. So the reason I like assemblies is because they allow you to document a specific set of elements as something of its own. So I used the create view, and in this example, I just created a top view to just see this paving. So for example, if I want to have a paving plan, right, available. But another reason why I like these assemblies is because you can tag them as one element. And with environment, what we did in recent versions is we added the option to tag an entire assembly. Actually behind the scenes, we're just adding another parameter to this assembly. And this is the assembly content parameter that you see over here. So if you have environment, each assembly would have this parameter. And this parameter, you can change and edit it with the assembly content settings. So you can just go and say, all right, I want to see the amount of pavings and I want to see the type. It could be really any parameter that you have in your file. But basically now I can know how much paving elements I have in this assembly. So I have 314, which is quite a lot, and we need a way to control it. So another thing another manipulation I did over here, I wanted to tag each and every paving, each and every stone. So
Nice.
I created a toposolid tag that only takes the comment parameter from each toposolid. I could easily use, mark or anything. And I just tagged all of them together, and you can see they still don't have a parameter. So next, I went to use the number array parameter and just said, okay, give me a comment. So you could do a name, a comment, a mark, whatever you want, and just mark, select multiple. So I selected all of these elements, and environment just gave all of them a comment. And you will see in a second that now each of these pavers that I created with your amazing Grasshopper script, now each of them has a name, and we could start identifying them. So I think one of the special things why I'm excited that you're here, because usually in my work, I did all kinds of crazy pavers, but the contractor in the field, they were the one who decided, the size of the elements and but with Heather Week, I think for you guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for you guys, it's really important to control each and every element and understand your design before it goes into the field. So I thought it will be interesting to kind of tag each and every paver.
Yeah, it looks really powerful, to be honest, especially to identify each one of them instead of using just I don't know, CAD block or whatever. You have like an actual thing in Revit, and everything looks tagged perfectly to the center of the Voronoi. So it looks really promising, to be honest. We have to say, I think that Revit improved a lot over time.
Exactly.
So now today, I think these things few years ago they wouldn't be possible. So it's really promising to see how easy it is to add parameter schedule. So really, absolutely crazy. Good.
Yeah, and I don't know, my camera is off, but all right. Anyway, so I created a schedule because again, before that you mentioned that it's important to know the area and the parameters. So any parameter about this toposolid, different toposolids is available here in the schedule. And then next, I wanted to also show the area scatter tool, which is, again, I think for us, me and you, we're really promoting the approach of many different ways to do everything. So what I wanted to show is the area scatter tool over here. And again, it was special to do it with you because because usually we scatter elements on an organized grid, like a very, you know, organized English garden. But with this example, I got to use the irregular method, which gives us this forest effect. So, and again, this creates an assembly. This feature automatically creates an assembly. But I also have, and again, the assembly would allow us to later tag everything, right?
Nice.
But I also have the option to use the advanced selection tool and then to get different Revit families in a mix together. And I love the fact that it really reminded me your script, your Grasshopper script, because these are exactly the parameters that we want to control. So we have here the mix, and then I could start to play around with it. And the reason why I divided the boundary before is because it also allows me to avoid placing trees on the path, right? So it's another important element.
Yeah.
So
Looks amazing, to be honest, because it's more like user-friendly, I think, from this point of view, to tweak the area scatter here, if you are not into Grasshopper. Otherwise, if Grasshopper is your home, like I love to use Grasshopper, you can choose. So that's great, to be honest, for the architect to select what is the best tool for the job. I think none exclude the other, to be honest.
exactly. And yeah, just to admit, I'm a Rhino user before I'm a Revit user. So this was a tool that I used a lot in school, and I'm still using it a lot when there's a really challenging and a task. And now what I'm doing, I'm just using the same assembly content parameter, but over here I'm just I got the wrong tag, so I didn't exclude that from the recording. Let me just take the correct tag. So the tag should include the assembly content parameter within it. Don't worry if you don't have a specific tag, because when you're using environment, we provide a defaultive tag that you can later, add it and make it your own. But over here, I can actually tag these trees assemblies, and then I know I have 53 of the first species and 17 of the second species. And the assemblies are really great because the parameter that environment enter will update. If I delete one tree, the parameter will update, the tag will show everything. So I think, the strength of Revit is really the documentation process over here, and, the flexibility to show all the information, and the flexibility of Rhino together with the documentation of Revit. I think it's like the perfect combination. So yeah, I think this is why it's nice to have both together and not having to choose, but rather create a very integrated workflow. And I think when I started to work, when I started my path, it always felt like I have to learn a specific tool. Like I have to learn AutoCAD, I have to learn Rhino, I have to learn this, and this will be my one and only forever. And the more I go on in the industry, I realize that the strength is to have few skills and a few software. Also, if there's any young people around us that are hearing, get to know as many software as possible and have a very wide perspective of your skill set. I think this is really good for your career as well. I mean, look at Simone.
Yeah, totally agree. Absolutely. I think like the best way is to know the logic behind to understand few software and understand how to transition one to the other, rather than just think that one is better than the other one. Or I don't think there are. I mean, Revit is useful for some specific task, but it's really nice to see how you explore with the environmental. Some people like to go through Grasshopper, which is very stable, and other would say you can do everything with Dynamo. So it's good to see all of them, to be honest, together. So thank you for sharing. Absolutely interesting.
Great. All right. So I think, Augustina, if anybody has any questions, this will be a very good time.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for such an interesting and dynamic presentation. I think it's the first time that I've been in something that it's more like a conversation, which I find it way interesting. And I do agree. I think actually in Rhino, in McNeil, we do agree that it's difficult to have one tool that would solve all the problems, even more when it comes down to software that it's a solution for different type of markets. So for architects, industrial designers, artists. So it's usually a combination of tools, just such as a carpenter has different tools that would solve a problem. The same with software, and I think that's why we have in McNeil Food for Rhino, and that's why we have an open source for everyone to do the plugins and to make the Rhino, for example, part of all the tools that they need. So this was very interesting to showcase that and how to make that workflow smoother. So I have a couple of questions. I have one from Tran, but I couldn't really get at the moment that he asked that says, when you trim like that, you lost the border.
I think he meant when you trim the Voronoi pattern.
Or the pattern in environmental, I'm not sure, but
yeah, I think I remember I saw it live when you showed the node of trimming the Voronoi pattern. I think that's where
on the outside.
Yeah.
What he was saying about that, sorry, he wants
so if the trim with a trim like that, if you lost the border,
you shouldn't use lost the border, because every tile is kind of independent and it will create one closed loop basically. So Rhino Grasshopper does the job to not losing the border. What I've done is also duplicate the border of the surface at the outline separately, so we have the defined border of the outline, I would say. So that's the answer. So no, you don't lose.
So you include it in the script, right?
I include it. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I have another one from Arthur that says, can you do the same process if the starting topography surface is a triangulated mesh?
The starting topography in Rhino?
Yes.
No, it was a NURB. So it's an actual Rhino surface, native Rhino surface, not a mesh. But when I'm using to reference that into Rhino Inside, it will create a toposolid which is essentially a mesh. It will triangulate the matrix of point that I reference from Rhino to then create a mesh that is like the reference for Revit. So it's the answer is a bit of a mix. So it's referencing a NURB, but it's in the end for Revit is a mesh.
But could you create it as a mesh to begin with? And I mean, do you see any benefit in doing so?
It's kind of like the same, to be honest. So it's not a problem. There is a mesh, or a mesh is always a bit heavier in my experience. So we tend to use NURB or like surfaces that are more rationalized into Rhino, because you can render it, you can use it better. But then that's the interesting thing with Rhino Inside. You can even use that, reference them, and bring them into Revit. So that's why it's interesting.
I have Timothy asking me the same. I have a couple of people asking me that I'll just tell everyone that this is recorded and I will upload it and I will send the link to everyone in an email. And also I've been asked a couple of times if it's possible to share these work files or the Grasshopper script.
Yeah, to be honest, it's a fairly simple script, so I'm happy to share it. I will ask my team, because I want to thank the studio, of course, the BIM team and the GeoLead team. the G-code team that are helping developing the script. So I will ask them first because it's their kind of PI, and then I'm happy to share that after.
Great, and you can always send it to me, and I'll share it with everyone with the email that I will send with the link of the recorded video as well. I have another question from Signe. It says, whenever you change the work from Rhino to Revit, do you then lose all the annotations in Revit? Which I think it was already answered. But
yeah, we discussed it a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I have another one. Sorry.
No, just I just wanted to mention. I mean, Simone said it, and I said it as well, that it just changes the element in Revit. So this is why you usually lose the annotation.
But not all of them. It depends. Like if you have updating few elements, those elements, because so it's kind of like it depends as well on what you are. If you are deleting everything and rebuilding, you're gonna lose, of course, everything. But there are ways to like with Rhino Inside to just update that geometry with the node that I show with right clicking and say update instead of replacing.
Okay. More done. Anything else? I have Signe. No, sorry, that's the one I asked. I have Nithing, which says, hello, thank you so much for the presentation, very inspiring. Where can we download the Rhino asset plugin? That I will also send that information with the email, but I don't know if you want to comment something about it right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one tool in the Environment for Revit plugin. We worked very hard to start allow more interoperability with our plugin, so allow our clients. And as I said, Heatherwick Studio was the first inspiration to create the Rhino tool within Environment for Revit. So it's a free trial and it's a free download. And I think we're also gonna show up in Food for Rhino, hopefully. So yeah, work strong on this connectivity.
There is a trial period, no? They can test it.
Yeah, there's a 1 month free trial, and it's also completely free for students and universities. So
nice.
Just go to our website, Arc Intelligence, and it will be available there.
Thanks.
Oh.
I have Belen Vasquez who says, could you show the workflow in case you want to update the imported file with Rhino asset tools? Thanks.
Yeah. So I could just maybe share. I don't have any Rhino file ready to show this option, unfortunately, because I have to have like 2 files that are the same. But essentially, you just have to click on this menu over here, and then you get the reload from options, regroup, and all kinds of options that you could use to then reload your file when you change it in Rhino, so you can keep working in Rhino throughout your project.
Great, thank you, Nahama. Aubrey asks, do you have any photos of the paving as it is built? That'll be interesting as well.
That's interesting question, but no, I don't have it, and unfortunately, I've not been in New York, so I cannot. But I hope that all of us, now that we've seen the presentation, we are inspired to travel to New York and see the paving.
I would sure come to see. Would go to see it. I have Gergi, who says, is there our preference to meshes versus surfaces for importing the TopoSolid using the environment plugin? If there are holes in your surface, is this something environment can import?
Yeah, so as far as we tested it, we tried to import all kinds of meshes and surfaces from Rhino, so everything imports properly. Even if you have holes, it should recreate this boundary within Revit, so it shouldn't be a problem. Unless, of course, software be software and there's a problem, then reach out to us.
I've seen that also the environmental tool can import a point cloud, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I know point cloud can be imported to Rhino as well, and it can be also imported to Revit with environment for Revit. And we also added a new tool that allows you to create a topography from a point cloud automatically, so it can kind of recognize which parts of the point cloud belong to the topography and which parts belong to maybe a building or a tree. So it kind of excludes it, which can be, I think, very convenient.
Nice.
So I have the last question here. I had a question about the origin surface itself. Given an area to landscape, what tools or workflows can be used to import an accurate surface which represents the topography of the land? For example, iPhones have LiDAR sensors, which are sometimes used to scan environments and objects, but there is a lot of noise in the scan data. Are there any other ways to approximate the surface?
So I think that's what I mentioned before. If you're using a point cloud, then environment can automatically recognize which part of the points are surface. And then I think there can be many ways of transforming this information into Rhino. I mean, if you want to work on Rhino and you need the existing situation for background, then that would be interesting for me to explore. Like, how would you take it back to Rhino and like do all the directions? I don't think we have it figured out yet, but I definitely think there's some workflows, because Rhino can really get so many file types inside of it. So I'm sure that
if not, there's a lot of plugins that actually would fill in this compatibility. Actually, Yotam answered Abdullah saying environment for Revit actually has a tool for point cloud to topography. Yes. Okay. So I think with that, we finished the questions. Just want to say that there's also an amazing feedback throughout the chat. So
that's great.
Thank you for the speakers. It was amazing.
Thank you, guys. Have a nice day. Ciao.
I'll send you an email to everyone soon. So keep looking at your emails.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good day. Thanks for joining us.
Bye, everyone.